So hello and welcome back to As Graustark Turns. Not really, it's Beverly of Graustark, but it does feel a lot like a soap opera. Now that I've identified that in my mind, I can't really get it out of my head. And last night on As Graustark Turns, Beverly and Baldo stole a moment in the rain on the balcony where she kissed a rose and then put it into his teeth, and that was almost like them really kissing. And then we find out that they were possibly observed. Ah, be still, my heart. But yeah, it seems like the two, I was going to say young lovers, but I mean, I guess that fits. Um, are growing ever closer in their will they won't they sort of way. And also, I think I might have said that last night's chapter was chapter 22 when I was reading it off because Roman numerals are the bane of my existence. Tonight is chapter 22. So in case anybody was like confused about that, because I can't remember what I said. But yes, we are jumping back in to see what is happening in this 1900, what year was this written again? Like 1906, I think. 1904. In this 1904 soap opera, we are jumping back in to see what possible complications can come now between Baldos and Beverly. I mean, I feel like plenty of them have been thrown at them, and I get the feeling that more things, more monkey wrenches are probably going to come out in this chapter. I have only read the title of it, and it seems like that is definitely a thing. So we're jumping back into Beverly of Graustark by George Barr McCutcheon with chapter 22, which is titled A Proposal. I wonder who's proposing. Beverly shrank back with a great dread in her heart. Marlanx, of all men! Why was he in the park at this hour of the night? There could be but one answer, and the very thought of it almost suffocated her. He was drawing the net with his own hands. He was spying with his own eyes. For a full minute, it seemed to her that her heart would stop beating. How long had he been standing there? What had he seen or heard? Involuntarily, she peered over the rail for a glimpse of Baldos. He had gone out into the darkness, missing the men at the lamp post, either by choice or through pure good luck. A throb of thankfulness assailed her heart. She was not thinking of her position, but of his. Again, she drew stealthily away from the rail, possessed of a ridiculous feeling that her form was as plain to the vision as though it were broad daylight. The tread of a man impelled her to glance down below once more before fleeing to her room. Marlanx was coming towards the veranda. She fled swiftly, pausing at the window to lower the friendly but forgotten umbrella. From below came the sibilant hiss of a man seeking to attract her attention. Once more she stopped to listen. The "st" was repeated, and then her own name was called softly but imperatively. It was beyond the power of woman to keep from laughing. It struck her as irresistibly funny that the Iron Count should be standing out there in the rain, signaling to her like a lovesick boy. Once she was inside, however, it didn't seem quite so amusing. Still, it gave her an immense amount of satisfaction to slam the windows loudly as though in pure defiance. Then she closed the blinds, shutting out the night completely. Turning up the light at her dressing table, she sat down in a state of sudden collapse. For a long time she stared at her face in the mirror. She saw the red of shame and embarrassment mount to her cheeks, and then she covered her eyes with her hands. "Oh, what a fool you've been," she half sobbed, shrinking away from the mirror as though it were an accuser. She got ready for bed with frantic haste. Just as she was about to scramble in and hide her face in the pillows, a shocking thought came to her. The next minute she was at the windows, and the slats were closed with a rattle like a volley of firearms. Then she jumped into bed. She wondered if the windows were locked. Out again she sprang in a flash, and her little bare feet scurried across the room, first to the windows and then to her door. "Now I reckon I'm safe," she murmured a moment later, again getting into bed. "I love to go to sleep with the rain pattering outside like that. Oh dear, I'm so sorry he has to walk all night in this rain, poor fella. I wonder where he is now. Goodness, it's raining cats and dogs." But in spite of the rain, Beverly could not go to sleep. Vague fears began to take possession of her. Something dreadful told her that Count Marlanx was on the balcony and at her window, notwithstanding the rainpour. This fear became oppressive and maddening. She felt the man's presence almost as strongly as if he were in plain view. He was out there. She knew it. The little revolver that had served her so valiantly at the Inn of the Hawk and Raven lay upon a stool near her bedside every night. Consumed by the fear that the window might open slowly at any moment, she reached out and clutched the weapon. Then she shrank back in the bed, her eyes fixed on the black space across the room. For hours she shivered and waited for the window to open, dozing away time and again, only to come back to wakefulness with a start. The next morning, she confessed to herself that her fears had been silly. Her first act after breakfast in her room was to seek out Colonel Quinnox, the commander of the castle guard. In her mind, she was greatly troubled over the fate of the bold visitor of last night. There was a warm red glow in her face and a quick beat to her heart as she crossed the parade ground. Vagabond though he was, he had conquered where princes had failed. Her better judgment told her that she could be nothing to this debonair knight of the road, but her heart stubbornly resisted all the arguments that her brain put forward. Colonel Quinnox was pleasant, but he could give Beverly no promise of leniency in regard to Baldos. Instructions had come to him from General Marlanx that he could not set aside at will. Her plea that he might once more be assigned to the old-time duties found the colonel regretfully not agreeing. Baldos could not ride with her again until Marlanx withdrew the order which he now had given. Beverly swallowed her pride and her resentment diplomatically, smiled her sweetest smile to the distressed colonel, and marched defiantly back to the castle. Down in her rebellious, insulted heart, she was concocting all sorts of plans for revenge. Chief among them was the terrible overthrow of the Iron Count. Her wide scope of vengeance even contemplated the destruction of Graustark if her ends could be obtained in no other way. Full of all these bittersweet thoughts, she came to the castle doors before she saw who was waiting for her upon the veranda. As she mounted the steps, preoccupied frown upon her fair brow, General Marlanx, lean, crafty, and confident, advanced to greet her. The early hour was responsible for the bright solicitude which marked the place, but there were almost no signs of life evident around the castle. Beverly stopped with a sharp exclamation of surprise. Then scorn and indignation rushed in to fill the place of her astonishment. She faced the smiling old man with anger in her eyes. "Good morning," he said, extending his hand, which she did not see. Beverly was wondering how much he had seen and heard last night. "I thought the troops were massing this morning," said Beverly coldly. Don't you mask too? There is time enough for that, my dear. I came to have a talk with you. In private, he told her meaningfully. It's private enough here, Count Marlanx. What do you have to say to me? I want to talk about last night. You were very reckless to do what you did. Oh, so you were playing the spy then, she said scornfully. An involuntary observer, believe me, and a jealous one. I had hoped to win the affections of an innocent girl. What I saw last night shocked me beyond expression. Well, you shouldn't have looked then, she retorted, tossing her chin, and the red feather in her hat bobbed angrily. I am surprised that one as clever as you are could have carried on an amour so incautiously, he told her. What do you mean? I mean, I saw everything that occurred. Well, I'm not ashamed of a thing, she said. Goodbye, Count Marlanx. A moment. I cannot let you off so easily. What right had you to take that man into your room, a place sacred in the palace of Graustark? Answer me, Miss Calhoun. Beverly drew back in horror and confusion. Into my room? She gasped. Let us waste no time on lies. I saw him come from your window, and I saw all that passed between you on the balcony. Love's eyes are keen. What occurred in your chamber, I can only... Stop! How dare you say such a thing to me? Cried Beverly. You miserable coward! You knew that he was not in my room. You take it back! Take back every word of that lie! She turned white with passion and cold with terror. Bah! This is childish. I am not the only one who saw him, my dear. He was in your room. You were in his arms. It is useless to deny it. And to think that I have spared him from death to have it come to this. You need not look so horrified. Your secret is safe with me. I came to make terms with you. My silence is in exchange for your beauty. It's worth it to you. One word from me, you are disgraced and Baldos dies. Come, fair lady, give me your promise. It's a good bargain. Beverly was shaking like a leaf. This phase of his villainy had not occurred to her. She was like a bird trying to avoid the charmed eye of the serpent. Oh, you miserable wretch, she cried, hoarse with anger and despair. What a cur you are! You know that you are not speaking the truth. How can you say such things to me? I have never wronged you, and... She was almost in tears, impotent with shame and fear. It has been a pretty game of love for you and the excellent Baldos. You have deceived those who love and trust you the most. What will the princess say when she hears of last night's merry escapade? What will she say when she learns who was hostess to a common guardsman at the midnight hour? It is no wonder that you look terrified. But it is to you to say whether she is to know or not. You can bind me in silence. You have lost Baldos. Take me and all that I can give you in his stead, and the world will never know the truth. You love him, I know this, and there is only one way to save him. Say the word, and he goes free to the hills. Decline, and his life is not worth a breath of air. And pretending to believe this of me, you still are asking me to be your wife? What kind of a man are you? Demanded Beverly. My wife? He said. Oh, no. You are not wife to Baldos, he said significantly. Oh, good God! Gasped Beverly, crushed by the brutality of it all. I would die first. Would to heaven that my father were here. He would shoot you down like a dog. Oh, I hate you. Don't you try to stop me. I'm going to the princess myself. She will know what manner of a beast you are, sir. Then Beverly was racing up the steps, flaming with anger and shame. Remember, he shouted, I can prove what I have said. Beware what I do, or what you do. I love you so much that I now ask you to be my wife. Think about it. Your honor and his life, it all rests with you. He followed her to the door. You disgusting old fool, she hissed, turning on him as she pulled the big brass knocker on the door. I will have my answer tonight, or you know what will happen, he snarled. But he felt in his heart that he had lost through all of his eagerness. Beverly flew to Yediv's boudoir, consumed by rage and mortification. Between sobs and feminine maledictions, she poured the whole story in all of its ugliness into the ears of the princess. Now, Yediv, you have to stand by me in this, she announced conclusively, her eyes beaming hopefully through her tears. I cannot prevent General Marlanx from preparing serious charges against Baldos, my dear. I know that he was not in your room last night. You didn't have to tell me that because I saw you both at the balcony. Beverly's face at that took on such a radiant look of rejoicing that Yediv was amply paid for the surprising and gratifying acknowledgment of a second period of her eavesdropping. You may depend on me to protect you from Marlanx. He can make it very unpleasant for Baldos, but he shall pay dearly for this insult to you. He's gone too far. I don't think that he has any proof against Baldos, said Beverly, thinking only of the guardsmen. But it is so easy to manufacture evidence, my dear. The Iron Count has set his heart upon having you, and he is not one to be turned aside easily. He seems to think that he can get wives as easily as he gets rid of them, I think. I was going back to Washington soon, Yediv, but I'll stay on now and see this thing to the end. He can't scare off a Calhoun, no siree. I'm going to telegraph for my brother Dan to come over here and punch his head to bits. Now, don't be so high and mighty, my dear. Let's see how rational we can be, the princess told her gently. Whereupon the hot-headed girl from Dixie suspended hostilities and became a very demure young woman. Before long, she was confessing timidly, then boldly, that she loved Baldos better than anything in the entire world. I can't help it, Yediv. I know I shouldn't, but what are you to do when you can't help it? There would be an awful row back home if I married him. Of course, he hasn't asked me. Maybe he won't. In fact, I'm sure that he won't. I won't even give him the chance, but if he does ask me, I'll just keep putting him off. I've done that before, you know. You see, for a long, long time, I fancied that he might be a prince, but he isn't at all. I had his word for it. He's just an ordinary man like me. Only he doesn't look so ordinary. Isn't he handsome, Yediv? And dear me, isn't he impulsive? If he had asked me to jump over that balcony rail with him last night, I believe I would have done it. Wouldn't that have surprised old Marlanx? Beverly gave a merry laugh. The troubles of the morning seemed to fade away under the warmth of her humor. Yediv sat back and marveled at the manner in which this blithe young American cast out all of the blues. You must not do anything foolish, Beverly, said Yediv. Your parents would never forgive me if I allowed you to marry or even fall in love with any Tom, Dick, or Harry over here. Baldos may be the gallant, honest gentleman that we believe him to be, but he may also be the worst of adventurers. You can never tell, my dear. I wish now that I had not humored you in your plan on bringing him to the castle. I think I've done you wrong. You've seen too much of him, and you will be sensible, won't you, dear?" There was a real concern on the face of the princess, and Beverly gave her a kiss. "Don't you worry about me yet, Ev. I know how to take care of myself. Worry about your old Gabriel if you want, but don't you bother your head about me. Now, let's talk about that war. Marlanx won't do nothing till he hears from me, so what's the use in worrying?" Nightfall brought General Marlanx in from the camps outside the gates. He came direct to the castle and boldly sent word to Beverly that he must speak to her at once. She promptly answered that she did not and would not see him. Without a moment's hesitation, he then appealed for an audience with the princess, and that was granted. He proceeded, with irate coolness, to ask how far she believed herself bound to protect a person of Baldos. He understood that the princess was under certain obligations to Miss Calhoun, and he wanted to be perfectly sure of his position before taking a step which now seemed quite imperative to him. Baldos was a spy in the employ of Dawsbergen. He had sufficient proof, Count Marlanx said, to warrant arrest and execution. There were documents, and there was positive knowledge that he had conferred with strangers from time to time, even within the walls of the castle grounds. Marlanx cited instances in which Baldos had been seen talking to a strange old man inside the castle grounds, and he said that he had proof that he had gone so far as to steal away in the night to meet men beyond the city walls. Count Marlanx was ready now to seize the guard, but he would not do so until he had conferred with his sovereign princess. "Miss Calhoun tells me that you have made certain proposals to her, Count Marlanx," said Yetive. "I've asked her to be my wife, your highness." "You have threatened her, Count Marlanx." "She exposed herself to you? I would not have told what I saw last night." "Would it interest you to know that I saw everything that passed on the balcony last night? You will allow me to say, General, that you have behaved in a most outrageous manner in approaching my guest with such foul proposals." "Stop, sir. She has told me everything, and I believe her." "There is no need to discuss the matter any further. You have lost the right to be called a man. For the present, I have only to say that you will be relieved of the command of my army. The man who makes war on women is not fit to serve one. As for Baldos, you are at liberty to prefer the charges. Don't worry, he'll have a very fair trial." "Your Highness, you must listen to me," said Marlanx. "I will hear what you have to say when my husband is back by my side." "I can but stand condemned then, your highness, without a hearing. My vindication will come, however. With your permission, I retire to contrive the arrest of the spy. You may depose me, but you cannot ask me to neglect my duty to Graustark. I have tried to save him for Miss Calhoun's sake." But Yetive's hand was pointing at the door. 10 minutes later, Beverly was hearing everything from the lips of the princess, and Marlanx was cursing his way towards the barracks with vengeance in his heart. But a swift messenger from the castle reached the guardroom ahead of him. Colonel Quinnox was reading an official note from the princess when Marlanx strode angrily into the room. "Bring Baldos to me, Colonel Quinnox," said Marlanx without even greeting Colonel Quinnox. I regret to say that I have just this instant received a message from Her Highness, commanding me to send him to the castle. Quinnox said this with a smile. What the devil? What foolishness is this? Have a care, sir, said Quinnox stiffly. It is the princess that you are speaking of. Bah! I am here to order the man's arrest. It is more important than... Nonetheless, sir, said Colonel Quinnox, he goes to the castle first. This note tells me to disregard any command that you may give until further notice. Marlanx fell back, amazed and stunned. At this juncture, Baldos entered the room. Quinnox handed him an envelope, telling him it was from the princess and that he was to report at once to the castle. Baldos took one look at the handwriting, and his face lit up proudly. I'm ready to go, sir, he said, passing the Iron Count with a most disconcerting smile upon his face. And that is the end of chapter 22. Yeah, definitely feels like a soap opera now. As the Graustark turns, guiding Graustark. Graustark Hospital? No, definitely not Graustark Hospital. I am really enjoying this story, and I hope you are too. I still feel like oh my. I mean, it's less than a quarter of the book, but how many chapters are actually in this book? That is a very good question. Is there a table of contents at the front? My goodness. Roman numerals, they get me every time. All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 castles, or 9 castles left. We have 9 chapters left. So I don't know how much more we're gonna be doing, because you would think that that this story was really close to being wrapped up, but evidently it's not. So thank you as always for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that drama-filled chapter as much as I enjoyed almost killing my voice to read it. The weather is just enough that going down and trying to be gruff kraut Marlanx is really messing with it. Maybe I should have thought of a different voice for him. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoyed that. And please do leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. It does always make me smile. And I will see you tomorrow.